Hello, my name's Derek Willard. I'm the head of school at Augusta Preparatory Day School here in the Augusta, Georgia area. And thrilled to have this opportunity to present to you today about our innovation journey here at Augusta Prep. I'd like my colleagues to unmute and introduce themselves before we jump into the presentation.
Hi, everyone. My name is Andy Jives. I get to be the head of upper school here at Augusta Preparatory Day School and very excited to share our news with you.
Hello, I'm Julianne Ingram, head of the lower school.
And hello, I'm Monica Messner, head of middle school here at Augusta Prep.
All right, well, we're going to jump into our presentation. Give me 1 second to bring that up on the screen. Really appreciate everyone's patience presenting in COVID conditions. So we hope the technology is going to behave for you, and we'll get rolling. All right, I'm just going to ask Andy to verify that the slides are up on the screen and that he can hear me okay.
I can hear and see.
Outstanding. All right, again, I'm Derek Willard, head of school here at Augusta Prep, and I've been here for about 18 months. Did not have any idea that the second half of my first year on the job was going to involve a global pandemic. We've all been living this journey. We're not here to really tell you all the details about running school in a pandemic. We know you're living that, but what we really want to do is share how some work in the NAIS Innovation Lab, Strategy Lab, as they call it, really informed our process and helped us be prepared to innovate and be successful for this year. So this is how we're going to handle our time together today. Really, first thing I'm going to do is begin at the end. I'm going to tell you where we are right now and how things have gone for us here at Prep. And then I want to talk a little bit about someone who was absolutely influential in our success from NAIS, and then how that process played out here. We'll talk a little bit about what's called leading above the death line, which I think is one of the main lessons for our work this year. And then each of my colleagues who were intimately involved in some of the what we call sprint teamwork here, they're going to share their journey. And then we've got a couple of questions we think, if we were together in person, would be posed, and we'll get those answered for you. So a couple of quick facts about Augusta Prep. Again, we're here in the Augusta, Georgia area, founded in 1960, first class is 1961. So we're on the verge of a pretty big anniversary and thrilled about that. We actually take care of students age 2 through grade 12. And we're at about almost 400 students right now. And we've been 100% in person all year. That is, we've been here working within guidelines, and we did not offer our families a hybrid option or a fully online option. And we know that different schools across the country are in different situations. Everyone's had different local restrictions, maybe state restrictions, or demands from their families, but that's just the conditions here in our situation. So this is what things look like on August 3rd, 4th, and 5th. That's when we were working with teachers in person to get classes ready to start. And for us, after a period of orientation, we began classes in our spaces here 100% in person on August 10th. And I'm teaching this year. That's me right there in the middle. So a lot of what I speak about today, and my colleagues, even though they are heads of divisions, we're all teaching this year, and we are living this journey with our teachers. So it's been pretty incredible. We feel pretty blessed to be able to do what we've done. So just to give you a sense of where we are right now, again, I said I'd begin at the end. We thought of our operations in these 5 phases. And maybe your school has developed a similar sort of, phase system or color-coded system, whatever you want to call it. But normal operations, that's the green, that's phase 1, that's pre-COVID. Phase 2, I think all of us went through some warnings from our state departments of public health or our governors about taking some steps for extra hygiene and sanitation in March. And then suddenly mid-March, we saw colleges close, and we saw many, I think, just about all schools except a handful of preschools across the country close, public and private. And so we hopped to what we would call phase 5, right? Essentially, our campus was shut down and everyone was working from home. And what we set out to do, based on the information I'll show you, the guidelines we were given, was to open in phase 3. And that's what we did. And that's how we've operated for the entire year. Really, CDC protocols. And nothing I could explain there on this slide will tell you much more than probably you don't already know as a school leader. So here in Georgia, early June, we had our State Department of Public Education lay out some pretty clear recommendations about opening in person, and they left multiple paths for schools to choose. So for us, that yellow zone in the middle, it says enhanced mitigation measures, and there were really 3 tracks that schools could follow recommendations for: traditional, hybrid, or full distance remote learning. And we saw schools across the state and in our area open in different phases, but we chose to focus on the traditional one, knowing we could kind of transfer to the other types if need be. Additionally, we all saw guidance come out from the Centers for Disease Control on a national level. Again, it was guidance based on best evidence and was meant to complement or work with any state guidelines. And so with those pieces in place, we took a look at our entire operation from a risk management perspective. And we looked at what we thought we could accept in terms of risk, opening in person, the things that we could mitigate. And we knew we needed a lot of mitigation strategies. We were thrilled that the Department of Education here and the CDC provided some of those. And then things we could just try to avoid. You've all probably gone through this. Grandparents' Day is a time-honored tradition in independent schools, but this is one of those years where we're just going to avoid that risk. So, tried to come at it from a total risk management perspective and end up in a place right before school where we had risk reduction strategies at every level. Some of those were individual behaviors. Some of those were room-specific behaviors or equipment situations. Some of those had to do with school-wide procedures or campus-wide procedures, such as limiting visitors. And we felt really good about that. We published that plan in mid-July. And so, again, I said I'd begin at the end. We are where we are right now. And when I asked our leaders, some of whom are going to talk to you in a few minutes, kind of what are the main lessons learned? What are we so glad we did? And I asked this question probably the first month of school. And I'm not going to read each one of these to you, but in summary, we're glad we communicated clearly, consistently, and often with our parents. That set expectations. We're glad we severely limited campus access and gradually increased that over time. We're glad we worked with our teachers throughout the summer on some professional development for online teaching, new equipment. We're glad we did the things you're going to hear the division heads talk about in just a moment. And more importantly, what's in red there. We're so glad that we adopted a distributed leadership model to do this work. And you're going to hear us talk about that model. and that we ran all these protocols through a central group. And really, it was our safety committee. Our safety committee kind of became our relaunch committee. There were a handful of things we wish we'd have thought of, but by and large, we were really pleased with that work. And as you can see, we've been here operating in this mode since the start of school. We're thrilled that that's happened. We've had no community spread. We've played sports. We've had performing arts, all of them under creative conditions that mitigate risk of spread. So that's where we are right now. That's kind of beginning at the end. And I think the presentation is really, how do we get there, right? How do we go through this and innovate and get there? And to start that portion of the presentation, that portion of this journey, I want to go back, way back in time. In a previous life, I was a U.S. Army officer. And this is a picture of me on a mountain over Port-au-Prince, Haiti in the fall of 1994. And some people remember, some people may not, but we invaded the island nation of Haiti at the request of their leader in the fall of 1994. And originally it was going to be the largest airborne operation since World War II. And fortunately, the dictator that had taken over the island, he decided to take the money and leave. And we didn't have to do that, but we did have to go down and run peacekeeping operations for about a month. But as we've lived this pandemic as school leaders, one of the things that's occurred to me is this is the closest thing to planning for combat. This is the closest thing to my previous job that I've experienced as an educator. And I've been in education for about 25 years now. And let me just frame it this way. In the military, the mission changes all the time. It doesn't matter where you go, right? A military unit is called on to do something. And so what that something is, the location may change, the mission may change. It won't always be the same. You may use some similar techniques, but those things are always changing. And what doesn't change is really kind of how they attack it. There's a solid process, and it's based on something called the 5-paragraph operations order. And that operations order really works like this. You have a background situation, you have a clear mission, you outline how your execution is going to go down, you account for the logistics, and then finally, you have a communications plan, what we call a command and control plan. That doesn't change. So military leaders are kind of trained, hey, here's the next, here's the next new situation, the next new mission, and then you go out systematically attacking that. Well, for us as a school, and I imagine many of you were in the same place, that we'd never done this before. We'd never seen this before. We weren't even sure the protocols were going to be in place to do this well. And so how do you plan for, lead, and execute schooling in a pandemic when you don't even really have a process for that? And so that's really where the story of our success this year begins. It begins with this guy, Tim Fish, and a book. I don't know if you're familiar with Tim. I'm hoping if you're hearing this presentation that this is new information to some of you, and that you will get turned on to the work that Tim, as Chief Innovation Officer of NAIS, and the team in NAIS are doing around helping schools innovate. And whatever the innovation may be, whatever needs to drive it. But Tim and I had done some work together. I had the good fortune of being involved in some of the early work at what used to be called, I think, the Innovation Kitchen at NAIS headquarters. And Tim and I have stayed in touch. And as we face this challenge of reopening school this year, I called him and I said, Tim, is there any way you could potentially help us, give us some guidance? We've got a team retreat in May, and we're trying to figure out how to attack school in a pandemic for the fall of 2020 and the spring of 21. And Tim said, sure, I'll do that. And so if you haven't seen this before, let me explain this briefly. This is a metaphor that's come out of the team work that Tim and the team have done. It's called the magnetic mountain. And a lot of it had to do with, pre-pandemic with the jobs to be done theory that NAIS writes about on the website, and what parents expect of us, and how we're going to innovate and work to have this magnetic, idea, this summit that people are drawn to, that helps draw people to our school. And so I'm just going to reference this metaphor. You can find it online. It's probably a little hard to read on the screen in this presentation, but hopefully it'll give you a sense of how, again, the purpose of the presentation, NAIS helped focus our innovation. So our now town down on the lower left there, our reality was we were looking to open school in person. We needed a good process to do that. We needed a way to test those ideas. And Tim came in and kind of helped us focus on a very, simple question. If we stick with the metaphor and climbing, and Tim lent me this slide, what do we have now? What do we have in place? What do we know? And what do we need to add to our pack to make this journey? And one of the things Tim asked us to consider to put in our pack right away was to read this book by Jim Collins. Jim Collins has written a number of the foremost books on leadership and leadership theory. And this is really more of a business book written after the 2008, economic crisis. But Tim recommended our team read it to prepare for our innovation journey, and in particular because it contains some really solid advice about how some of the best companies in the world have emerged from periods of uncertainty and chaos and crisis, and becomes successful, and not successful like one-hit wonders, but year after year success. And so you've heard the quote about, I think it's the Chinese symbol, for crisis, it's got opportunity in there or something like that. But basically, right, how do we not waste a good crisis? How do we look forward and do what we need to do? And the simplest way to explain this, right, I'm not going to give you the full cliff notes on the book, but the diagram that's on the slide, one of the things that we were really turned on to was that Jim talks about having a fanatic discipline, right? Having an absolute clarity and focus day after day, slow and deliberate on where you need to go and marching towards that. He also talks about empirical creativity, which is really a lot about prototyping and taking small risks, making small bets. I believe the term is firing bullets before cannonballs. And then last but not least, having productive paranoia as leaders, thinking through all eventualities and actually trying to be prepared for them. So that was one of the biggest gifts we could have received as a team, was to have that language, to have that structure to begin to attack our problems. So Tim came in, he couldn't actually come in. So he was able to do some of this work that I'm about to show you virtually. He had a tool he wanted to use, but basically walked us through a strategy to develop what's called a base camp in that mountain metaphor. And a base camp, right, that's your kind of moment of clarity where you're preparing to go for the summit. And so he challenged us to think about our DNA. What do we do different? What's unique to us and we do better and can do better and bigger than anyone? What assets do we currently have we can leverage in this journey? What's going to hold us back? Some of the headwinds, the obvious challenges of the pandemic, but maybe others in our market. And then from that, develop some plans where we could innovate. So Tim literally led us through some digital Post-it note exercises around that framework. And then he took us through what's called the Kano model. Another wonderful tool. I know Tim and the team at NAIS are a big fan of this, but it really gets schools focused on customer satisfaction. That's that vertical axis, and then implementation or kind of functionality and performance. And thinking in terms of what things are basic, you got to give families that. And we knew in a pandemic, safety was basic. There could be no compromise. Performance, what are called performer traits, things your school, does really well, and then exciters, things that are just like off the chart, turn people on. And your places to innovate are those performers and exciters. So there's lots out there about that. Tim talks all the time about the Kano model. It's not the purpose of our presentation today, but all of these were ways to help us focus, to have a moment of clarity in that base camp. And then where you see second ascent to that first summit, okay, having a moment of clarity, climbing towards testing, prototyping ideas, that's where we had to head next. And so here's how we organize that. I'm just going to talk for a few minutes more. Again, I wish we were in person. I wish this could be more interactive, but I'm going to talk a few minutes more about how we organize that work. And then you're going to hear from folks who did the prototyping, who did those little climbs to that summit to test the equipment and see what it was like. But we took a fresh look based on advice from Tim on all the things we needed to execute on. And really, I'm focused on the right side of this diagram. We thought about our 2-year-old program reopening early. We thought about our day camps. We thought about our athletic practices. We thought of them as discrete challenges and places we could prototype protocols and work towards school being open. We thought about once school was going to be open, right? How could we innovate in terms of time, the schedule? How could we innovate in terms of our methods, what we could accomplish with kids? And how could we innovate in terms of our spaces, right? How could we use this moment, again, not to waste a crisis, but to make great decisions that set our kids up for success, not only in a pandemic, but beyond. And then we thought about mental health and the challenges that were going to be there and other things. But as we did that, we adopted, at Tim's suggestion, something called the Mocha Model. And if you're not familiar, I'm putting that up on the screen. I found a basic definition at a site called managementcenter.org, and that resource is at the bottom of the slide. But the Mocha Model, if you're not familiar, you develop a small sprint team. They've got a very specific charge. One person's the manager. They're assigning responsibility, holding the owner, kind of the leader of the project, accountable. You can see they're supposed to ask hard questions, review project progress, serve as a resource, intervene if necessary. But the owner, right, the O, that person is really responsible for leading the project. Okay, they're responsible for that success. They can hire or bring on consultants, those that can be consulted to help. They can bring on helpers who are actually going to help them do the work. And then there has to be someone involved who's an approver, signing off on decisions before they're final. It could be the manager, and we had folks working with us who were managers, but it could also be that safety committee. So we steered all our Mocha sprint teams back to that safety committee, which is there in the center, and that was a place to get approval to move forward. So the other strategy we used is something called the Kanban model. I'm not going to play this for you right now, actually, because I want you to hear from our managers. But the Kanban model is also something I recommend you look into. You can find easy Kanban in a nutshell videos out there. Another technique developed, I believe, in Japan that had to do with project management. And Tim recommended this too. Excuse me, I'm going to skip this. Here we go. So Tim actually recommended Kanban and how to look into Kanban, and there are different tools out there. But essentially, we developed a real-time tracking chart. In this case, it was just a Google spreadsheet, and that let us track each of these projects in real time. In many cases, some of this work we weren't together in person to do it. And so we were tracking due dates, progress reports, completion through our version of what's called a Kanban process. So highly recommend that too. A great place to do some research. So once that work was well underway, particularly in June and July, we had reached a small summit. We had reopened our 2-year-old program. We had reopened our day camps. We had done athletic practices. And so that gave us this opportunity to have a more clear vision of where we needed to end up in the fall. So the second summit, right? Getting to the fall and running school wide open. And so I hope you can see how we operated, number one, right? We began at the end. Number two, how the NAIS team helped us focus and prepare, gave us the language, gave us a task organization, and gave us a tracking tool to do all this work. I'll just mention briefly the one other thing we did that was wonderful advice from the Jim Collins books was what's called leading above the death line. He's got some great metaphors around climbing Everest and different approaches by people. But the most successful teams practiced and developed tools for when they got to that summit and dealing with those challenges. So we did sand table exercises well in advance where we thought we might have to close a class, close a team, close a sport. Close a grade or close the school and go back online. And so that was a really helpful exercise. Again, great language from this Jim Collins book, great by choice, and I highly recommend it. We developed tracking tools. All of these things helped us be successful as we went for that second summit. So thanks for hanging in there. Thanks for your patience. I've talked far too long. I'm going to step out of these slides and turn this over to one of our managers. And so if you'll give me just a second for that transition, I want to reintroduce Andy Jives. Andy, I've hit stop. Should be yours to command here in just a second.
I think we're coming along. Is it up on the screen?
The slides are on the screen. I'm going to go to mute and turn my camera off, Andy.
Excellent. All right. Thanks, Derek. Thanks for all of that setup. And it was really an honor and great professional development to get to champion one of these teams in the manager role. Certainly in the wake of the spring that we had and preparing for all of the unknowns of the year. So I'm a few slides ahead here, I think. There we go. So the issue that my team looked into was time. We had this opportunity, and we saw it as an opportunity to examine our schedule and think about what we might do with that could be different and could be of service given all of the unknowns and what was coming this year. The current state of the schedule was, as many schools find, clunky at best. The schedule hadn't been touched in about 10 years, despite minor tweaks here and there. And some things that were true of it were that it was causing disalignment across campus. There was a lot of shifting between lower, middle, and upper schools, and we couldn't quite align. In addition to which, the 4-day rotation had us out of alignment with the world. So when it came to off-campus speakers or internships or things like that, it made for extra challenges. So it was clunky to begin with. It was also the case that if we were going to need to have students at home awaiting test results, isolating in quarantine, which of course we have had, that schedule was going to require them to be at a screen for 8 hours a day, which was just no way to operate. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, the schedule, given all that we know about learning, about the brain, about stress levels, and we knew we were going to be looking at a lot of low-grade chronic stress this year, and even how our community works and the family atmosphere we wanted to create, our schedule was turning out to be quite at odds with all of those things. So it was a great opportunity for us to dig in. Working with the Mocha team, and having the distributed leadership opportunity, what was great was we could really set a desired outcome by way of these design drivers. So what was the case for this team was anything they wanted to explore, anything they wanted to propose, it needed to maintain these 5 things at a minimum. So making sure that the learning experience stayed intact. We were thinking about students learning from home and how we would support them. Being able to toggle, if necessary, to a full remote learning, if that were to come up for us, which happily it has not, knock wood. and responding to the needs of all three divisions. So again, we are seeking to be a one school feel at all times, and this was an opportunity for that. Finally, we know the community we are and the community we want to be, and making sure that we are able to build community with a schedule and enhance student support as well. The Mocha model here, allowing for distributed leadership, allowing for leadership development amongst colleagues, I was able to really step away once the design drivers were set. We had the purpose, we knew what the outcome needed to look like, and allowing then for there to be a lot of autonomy with the how the team would actually work and do this work and achieve it together, was very liberating for them and a lot of fun for me to watch. So it was a cross-divisional team. We had lower, middle, and upper school folks involved. Their level of investment led to a level of energy, led to a level of motivation that was quite impressive to see. They looked at about 10 different schools and were able to pick and choose among aspects of schedules that they found to be exciting, helpful, innovative, and then they could match those up against the design drivers as they came up with a couple of different scenarios that we were to explore together that they were proposing for approval. The key changes that we ended up with, their final product resulted in 2 schedules. They determined that we would need an in-person schedule that would meet those 5 design drivers, and that the best way to meet those 5 design drivers, if we were to be off campus again, was to have a second schedule. Happily, we have only needed 1. Now that second schedule, the remote learning schedule, it is published, it is ready to go. It is a turnkey solution if we should need it. And our hope again is to avoid that and stay in person. The in-person schedule, we've gone to a 5-day rotation. So we've solved a lot of those issues of being at odds with the world. We're now seeing more internship activity happen. We can consider adjunct faculty who can plan better for a Tuesday being a Tuesday versus a Tuesday being a D-Day. So we've got that working for us. We've also got 40-minute periods, which is down from 47 minutes. Now, I think we all found last spring that contact time, what that means, has changed greatly for our students and for our teachers. So all of a sudden, 40 minutes, it doesn't quite feel as short if we've got an ability to have asynchronous things happening electronically and other sorts of things that we all learned how to do better with Google Meet, Google Classroom as we were remote last year. There's longer passing time. This allows for more space, better travel in the hallways as we're looking to keep kids safe. We've also got any number of classrooms that you'll hear my colleague Julianne talk about that are elsewhere on campus. We've got large spaces we've taken advantage of. That means more travel time, so we extended the passing time. And finally, we added a 60-minute M period, which is split into 3 20-minute modules right at the end of the day. So from 2:10 p.m. until 3:10 p.m., that is open time that is intentionally unstructured so that clubs can meet, students can seek out teachers for extra help, teams can collaborate, and all of that is building the type of learning experience and the type of community that we want to be. Now, living that, it was a great looking schedule on paper, and as we got into it, there were concerns and there were doubts about, well, what would happen with this class time? Would 40 minutes feel like too little? Would it feel like it's going too fast? Would the passing time create too much of a social environment? Would students actually stick around for these M periods? And I'm happy to say that living this and gathering student feedback and faculty feedback and parent feedback, those concerns all disappeared within the first couple of weeks. Indeed, 40 minutes has been a great amount of class time, whether you're on campus or off. And we have had a number of students needing to quarantine. Passing time has been great, and it's actually created more opportunities for one-off connections, different conversations, and happily it has become just a little bit more social, and that's been good for our culture. And finally, the M periods have been the saving grace of any number of different things. Students are getting a jump on homework, they're getting a jump on guided homework, they have access to their teachers, clubs are meeting, assemblies are happening, so it's been a great thing for us. Isolated students who need to be off campus, they've benefited really nicely from this. The school day is just a little shorter, the periods are just a little tighter, they can take advantage. Stress level has been lowered across campus. We're seeing students thrive. Our community is connected, and we're continuing to find opportunities. Again, internships are a big opportunity for us, and adjunct faculty who can plan for their schedules will continue to be a great opportunity, among others that I'm sure that we will find. So that's the timepiece which resulted in a great schedule that we are living and loving every day. And with that, I will shift over to my colleague Julianne as I leave the presentation.
Okay. Can you guys see me?
We can.
All right, great. So I'm Julian Ingram, head of the lower school, and I am going to present on spaces. So can you see my slides?
We can't, Julianne.
Okay. Oh, hold on. Please be patient with me. We good now?
You're good.
All right, great. Thank you. All right, so using the same Mocha model that Andy talked about, we formed a team and we're tasked with the following. And I'm going to kind of start real quick by just saying what I learned from this experience with the Mocha team. And I think the number one thing I learned is that I can't and don't have to do it all. And this made it really easy. It also was a lot easier for faculty to buy in when other faculty who were the owners of the team assigning the task were out there assigning these tasks. And it kind of separated Monica and Andy and I, so we didn't look like the big bad wolf coming and telling them that they were going to have to do some things that might be uncomfortable. So that has helped me this year with other things that have come up. So that's been a great learning experience for me. We were tasked with how might we gain more square footage by de-densifying classrooms in storage spaces? How might we space our students 6 feet apart? How might we leverage the use of common spaces that are not usually used for classrooms? And how might we use our outdoor spaces as classrooms? So the first thing we tasked our faculty with was de-densifying their classroom. And Derek, I think you made that word up, but anyway, it worked well. And you'll see over here, I've got a picture of 2 storage units. Those are sea land crates that we've painted to camouflage, hiding in our woods. And they are full of lots of things that people just could not give away or throw away. I think everybody's realizing they don't need them. And the things in those sea land crates will probably not ever come out, but it was comforting to our faculty, especially my lower school faculty, to know that their things were safe on campus. So with that, we moved on to, I'll let you kind of know how we, or explain how we sort of started that process. We eliminated all desk or nest spaces, which lower school teachers, and I think some middle and upper school teachers as well, had created some pretty large spaces that were taking up a lot of square footage. In some situations, you could put 2 kids where a desk was. So we took all the big clunky desk out and everybody acquired a small mobile podium and we let them pick their podium. So they had a little say in that and they got to choose a chair. So we replaced that big clunky space with something much more streamlined and much more conducive to COVID times. We removed all file cabinets. Teachers are learning that their Chromebook can store all their files and they no longer need those metal file cabinets in a room. And the younger grades, we removed or streamlined home living centers so we weren't taking up so much space for one activity. Large bookcases and furniture were moved and replaced with smaller pieces. We did heavy spring cleaning. We actually brought a dumpster on campus and we threw a lot of things out. Excess furniture and unwanted items were donated to local charities. I showed, I've got these pictures in here so that you can see it was pretty cluttery. So this is a classroom where I'm pointing to right now. If you can look right in this corner, this was a huge clunky desk. She got it cleared out. It was a huge process. We had a lot of things to get rid of. We were able to do that. We found some outdoor spaces. We had some shade cells put up and we bought a lot of chairs. We cleaned out Lowe's and Home Depot of their plastic Adirondack chairs. We had some tents put up and stayed on campus for a couple of months until we had a parent donor give us money so that we could build this nice permanent pavilion now. You can see here the podiums and our desk spaced out. This is all that is left now of a teacher's desk or nest space. And you can see here that our students are able to be spaced 6 feet. So when they are not in motion, they are able to take their mask off in our building. You can see this teacher in a high school got very creative, and he used his wall for some storage, which I thought was a really great use of space. And in our art room, I wish I had a before picture of this room, but this really was a huge transformation. And you can see we had plexiglass dividers here in these long tables for further safety. And then we got really creative. This is the lobby of our Fine Arts Center, and we have been able to use this for parent presentations. In May, we got very creative. We put our students, our graduates, in the stands. This has also served as a high school meeting space. They've been able to put the classes in there to have big class meetings. Teachers have just gotten creative and used the space in the hallway. And then we've been able to use our library for larger classes. I am now going to pass things over to Monica Messner.
Thank you, Julianne. Again, I am Monica Messner. I'm the middle school division head, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how the Mocha group that I managed this summer worked. So if you give me just a moment to get my slides up.
You're good to go, Monica.
Perfect. Thank you. So we began this summer really with the charge of running the Mocha groups and beginning this sprint to getting school open. And I had the opportunity to work on a group that began as a curriculum and methods group. And I worked with a fantastic owner. We were able to pull in faculty members from the lower school, the middle school, and the upper school. And we were exploring, how are we going to maintain Prep's high academic quality and really keep our programming, improve student agency, maintain community, and improve tech tools for use in person or online. And really all of that was born from a need for us to just improve continually as an organization and to figure out how we were going to be that organization during the time of COVID. And so we were ready to go. We had our tasking, we had our folks, and we set up our first meeting. Half of us were logging in virtually, half of us were on campus. Some of us for the first time with other folks. We were masked and ready to roll. And we realized pretty quickly that we needed to step back and get some more clarity for ourselves. And I think we took 2 steps up the mountain and realized that there was so much more that we needed to figure out really where we were going to focus. Because prior to our breaking for COVID and prior to looking this summer how we were going to reopen, we had some faculty task forces who studied things like brain-based learning and cultures of thinking, looked at our homework and sort of our outside school time, and they presented at the last faculty meeting of the year. So we felt it important, particularly when we were looking at learning and teaching, that we incorporated so much of what they shared. We had a first iteration of an instructional continuity plan, but had collected so much feedback from faculty members and parents and students. And so we knew we needed to take what worked, figure out what didn't work, and then adjust accordingly. Before we knew we'd be tackling some of what we had to tackle to reopen, brought on a new student information management system. So teachers for the first time were going to have so much more access to student information. They were going to have new grade books. There were some grade book expectations that needed to be developed and put in place, which we felt fell under the umbrella of best practices in teaching and learning. And so the first thing we did as a group was dump all of our questions and things that we thought we needed to discuss and dive deeper into, essentially in a pile, and then sorted those, trying to find groups of things. And we emerged after that first meeting and after a lot of discussion for our work a little bit better prepared to go forward. And so we brought on for us an essential question. It was, how are we going to ensure that our families who pay for a prep experience get that top-notch experience, whether they're here with us on campus, home for 14 days, waiting on test results. And for us, it became, we were going to explore our quality programming. We wanted to make sure we increased student agency, maintained that community connection, because we lost a little bit of that as we all went virtual. We did need to refine technology use. And based on faculty feedback, they had posted kind of a list of problems that they encountered that we hoped to solve, and then a list of tools that they used a little bit and wanted some professional development. So we needed to wrap that in too. And then ultimately, we just wanted to make sure that our teachers were equipped to use best practices in their classrooms in ways that would support learners no matter where they are. So once we had that focused, and we were really ready to sprint. And so our manager, our owner of the group, aligned the right faculty members with different sections of our project, and sent folks who were experienced in technology worked in that area. Folks who had some background in different learning support worked to identify some best practices that would work for all of our students and our struggling students. We outlined the work that we wanted to accomplish and the timetable with some checkpoints along the way, because we knew this was going to be something where folks got together, we met, we discussed, we set the path forward, and then stepped back and did a lot of work on our own. We made it so that about the halfway point, and then the halfway before we finalized our project, we were getting together and we were asking hard questions, and we were throwing, well, what about this? And have we thought about this around, so that we made sure everybody kind of had a stake in everyone else's part of the project. And then the one thing we really wanted to make sure that we did was, because we were tackling so much, and some of our things really just needed to be kind of approved by division heads, and other things needed to be approved by the safety committee, and other things were really tech professional development. We wanted to make sure that no matter the faculty member, they could walk away with some learning and some next steps that worked for them. And so for those folks who wanted, just give me the nuts and bolts, I want the bullet point list, what can I do to be better? We had that. And then embedded within what became our final report, we had links to all of the research, because we knew that there were folks who wanted to know why am I doing that? And, how did we get to this decision? And then we started thinking forward and mapped out some professional development that we knew our teachers would need based on, some of the recommendations that we made for brand-based learning, some of the things that we were suggesting as far as tech tools, and then of course the online gradebook. I think overall, one of the things that worked well for our group was we were able to tackle a ton. Sometimes change in schools takes a long time. And to quote something Derek said earlier, there's the adage, never waste a crisis. We were able to, in 2 months, really move the group forward. And so our people worked really well. The process that we put in place worked well. That time worked really well. It really was an expedited innovation. And part of that was we had to, because we had to do these things to open well. And other things just felt like, we're changing all this, we might as well think through these things. It really allowed us, the way the group worked, the team that came together, and the outline of the Mocha model allowed us to address faculty concerns much more efficiently than we could if there was one division head and a tech director trying to tackle everything. And it was a true 3-divisional collaborative effort. Every division head had a stake in some collaboration into what was going on. We had faculty members from each division. Because we tackled so much, our approval went into different directions. And so it allowed folks who didn't always have leadership roles a chance to really step into that. And there's some things that in hindsight, I wish that we had known going into it. For us, I think we were ready to go. The word sprint got us all excited. We had our charge, we started, and then very quickly became overwhelmed. So just knowing that we were going to need some time after we were given the charge to seek clarity for ourselves, we would do that differently. We would worry less. As Andy said, we spent a lot of time worried about how things would feel and where they would fall, and if faculty would embrace it, or would it be too much on top of everything else. And quickly we realized what we focused on as far as what we worried about was just a non-issue. I think part of that, we also had to recognize that faculty were stretched. They had gone through the most stressful spring. They were going through a very stressful summer, and that's a rest time for traditional, 10-month teachers. And so it was important to us to know that we had to just give breaks and let folks have some breathing room too. And then one thing that our group did, we really focused on the sprint, and we got to school opening, and there were some things that I wish that we had planned further into the school year, because once the school year started, then it became the day-to-day tasks and the tracking of COVID and the, adjusting our day-to-day protocol. And I think that if we had set some dates for, hey, we want to get back together and collect feedback at this date, we'd have done that more so than we have already. But overall, it was a fantastic process. We were able as an institution to reflect and to change and to adapt and pivot in a way that, a school with a 60-year history doesn't always get to do in 2 months. And with that, Derek, I think I'm throwing it back to you.
Monica, thank you. I'm going to ask each of you maybe to turn your microphone on mute, but turn your camera back on here. And while we're transitioning, I want to say just how proud I am of this group. And I'd encourage them all to present at this conference. And we were so hopeful to do it in person. So sorry we can't. We're doing all this in a COVID time. It'd be great if we were all in a room and could do some Q&A, but since we can't, I'm just going to leave you with a couple of thoughts. Let me get those up on the screen. Monica, if you can confirm when my slides are up.
We can see you. We can
Thank
see
you.
your slides.
All right. We do have a time limit on this presentation, but I think you've heard us share. Monica was just explaining some of what was most difficult, what was most beneficial. I think each of those Mocha managers did that. What was most beneficial, Monica, the term I loved that you used was expedited innovation. And that's really what we needed. We had a tight deadline, and everyone did a tremendous job. And part of it was leadership, and part of it was process. We will definitely use these techniques again in the future. We're already talking about this summer what kind of projects would be good fits to have these sprint teams. So this has definitely changed how our school approaches innovation. And I highly recommend you guys reach out to Tim Fish or look into training with the NAIS Strategy Lab. They've offered sessions around the country, and we're happy to answer questions. Our website's augustaprep.org. Look us up. Look up an email. We're happy to have more conversations. I'm going to leave you with this slide, which Tim Fish also provided for me, and I think this is a part of our journey. This is a good summary. And I can't remember exactly where he got it, but 3 characteristics of schools working in partnership to imagine the future, right? Beyond the pandemic, moving from endurance thinking, right? That marathon Monica mentioned, to emergent thinking, right? Taking advantage of the situation, being flexible, taking small bets to help calibrate and validate big bets in the future, and then having a clear understanding of who we serve, right? And differentiated value. And I'm telling you, it's that triangle. This is based on that triangle from Great by Choice. And highly recommend the book, highly recommend the NAIS innovation teamwork, and just so thrilled at this team and their work. And good luck to all of you, wherever you are. Maybe we'll get to meet again in person at next year's event. But we're going to sign off for now. So take care.